Hi. Okay, if you're in your 20s, you're going to want to tune in today because we are going to have a conversation. We're going to have a conversation about being 20, not just 20, but 22, 25, 27, 28, 29. What are the things that you're supposed to be doing in your 20s? And like, what questions do you have that need answering? And how do you do 20 well, right? What does 20 look like? And can you do it well, or can you actually just destroy your 20s? We're going to talk all about that. And of course, I could tell you what it's like being 20, having been 20, but I'm not 20. I know it surprises a lot of you. I get it. But I thought it'd be better to have conversations with someone who is in their 20s. So I invited one of our team members, third year intern from BSSM, Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. Katie is here. Katie, thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here. And I'm so excited that we're going to have a conversation around being in your 20s.
Yes.
So you
good.
are, how old are you?
I'm 25.
You're 20. So you're smack dab in the middle.
Right in the middle.
You are succeeding at this podcast already. And I know that you are in the middle of a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have moved somewhere to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
You've already been in college. We can talk more about that.
Totally.
Maybe tell everybody, let's just do some of those main bullet points of your life. Maybe tell everybody who you are and what you've been up to up until 25.
Yes, I love it. I'm Katie. I am 25. I studied classical music performance at a Christian university in LA, which was super cool. And then I have been dabbling in the jewelry industry, and now I'm here at BSSM, and I'm loving it.
I love it. Dabbling in the jewelry industry. I would like to dabble with you. So you're here,
Mm-hmm.
you're 25. Let me ask you, what is it like being 20 in your 20s right now for you? What are things that what do you most enjoy about your being 20? In your 20s, I should say.
Yeah, I think being in your 20s is so nice because you've kind of come to a place of identity and knowing who you are, knowing what you like a little bit more. And I think in your teenage years, it's unconscious, like that you're finding identity, and you come to 20, you're like, oh, is this what it's supposed to feel like? It's a little more settled.
It is.
And so I think I'm enjoying that aspect and having friends that are in similar or even different stages of life. And getting to pull on people in that sense.
I just want to know what it's like to wake up and feel energy. I want to know what it's like to not have to think, am I losing hair? Like those kind of things. Okay, so I'm curious, what is it like right now? Is it like, if you were to say, Havilah, this is what it's like being in your 20s right now. You're obviously in California, in America, but obviously there's people watching from all over. But what is it like to be in your 20s right now?
Totally. Being in your 20s is not what I expected. Oh. I think it's interesting because kind of like what I was saying, in your teenage years, everyone is in the same stage of life. You're in high school, and then right after, you're still kind of in a similar stage of life. Either you're going to college or you're starting a job, and then you kind of hit 22 and everyone goes in what feels like a million different directions.
Yes.
And so
the great scattering.
Yes. And so some people my age are single, never been on a date, and some are married with 2 kids. Some have their own home, and some are in ministry schools all over the world. It's like there's no one right thing. This is where I should be. And it almost feels like there's not a gauge for what's right. And maybe that's all of life. But I guess it's kind of like, where am I supposed to be?
Yes.
There's a lot of question marks. Yes. It feels like.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. And I do think even different maturity levels and different people that got a head start because of their family or their parents knew they needed to have this set up, but other people that didn't get any help. They just landed in their 20s and they're on their own. I mean, there's a lot going on.
Right.
I'm curious, as you think about, and I love that dichotomy of one person is like not been on a date and then the other person has 2 kids.
Right.
It's so, I remember this in my 20s because I wasn't married in almost to my later 20s. At 25, I was smack dab in I'm not dating anybody. I'm living with my parents.
Right.
I've never owned a home, never owned a dog, don't have a child, don't have a degree, serving my church wholeheartedly. That was it. Yeah. And I remember that tension, and then being in weddings and people graduating from college and you're starting to feel like people's lives are moving, but I don't know if my life is right there yet.
Right.
And this tension. And I want to say to a 20-year-old, like, number one, that tension is just normal. There's this weird tension between being a kid and then having huge responsibility.
Right.
And there's this weird little zone. And some people thrive. It's like parenting. Like, you'll meet people and they'll be like, Me personally, loved babies. I was all about the babies. I don't like other people's babies as much, but I loved my babies. And I loved being able to meet their needs and systematically do that. And I would say teens are not my favorite. Don't let my kids watch this. But I would say in the same way, there are certain personalities and people that their 20s, they thrived in. They went to college, they met their friends, they had a blast. And then there's others of us that just aren't going to enjoy our 20s. And I definitely did not enjoy my 20s like I did my 30s.
Okay.
But I will tell you what I did in my 20s that I'm so grateful, and I would challenge every 20-year-old to do.
Okay.
And that is to add things to your life. Meaning not guys. Fries before guys. But I would say you want to add experiences, missions trips, friendships, small groups, go to a conference, try this class.
Yeah.
Just add a bunch of things. Try that friendship. Even date somebody like that you would never consider dating.
Totally.
Try that, because what you're going to do is add what you won't have the energy or the income to do later.
Wow.
You'll get to do now. So that would be mine. Wow. And what I remember thinking is, and this is just me, but if you get married early on and you have a child, then that's what you're going to throw yourself into, and you become a parent. And that's a beautiful, sacred expression. And I hope everyone gets an opportunity to do that. But if you don't get married in your 20s, rather than sitting and waiting to get married so you can start your life,
that's so good.
I'm so grateful that I went on multiple missions trips and backpacking trips and camped and backpacked with my friend to Cambodia and Thailand. And I mean, I did all kinds of crazy stuff in my 20s and ministry. It allowed me that when my life slowed down in my 30s and I had 4 kids, I didn't resent that, because I had all these other experiences. So I would say to the person who's feeling like, am I supposed to wait to get married? I'm like, you could waste your entire 20s waiting to check that box or waiting for that moment, or you could fill your 20s with a bunch of experiences and have a blast. So when that season does come, you don't resent it. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
So that's what I see the balance of that.
I love that. So then my question to that would be, for the 20-year-old person in their 20s who's feeling stuck, like, where do I even start? Like, I'd love to go on a missions trip. I'd love new experiences. I'd love to try something. I just don't know where to start.
Yes.
What would you say to them?
Oh, it's such a good question. And man, I see it in my own kids. Sadly, with your generation, and I sound like an old lady when I'm like, with your generation, it's so sad. But you guys you are the most educated in the sense of you have seen the most through your eyes, but the least risk-taking generation. You don't take risks.
Wow.
You'll talk about it, you'll watch it, you'll video it, you'll look at it, but you won't make the risk of texting that person or going to that class. You're more likely to be like, I'll get to it, or I'll try it.
Sure.
So I would say you need to force yourself to be in situations you're uncomfortable with. Wow. If you really want to become a great 20-year-old, like you have to go to that school of ministry. You have to move to that city. You've got to go on that date. You got to text that person. Yeah. You've got to, try something different. And you will never overcome that fear. Yeah. You have to just hit it head on. And the only way to build confidence to become the adult you want to be is you have to take risks. So I would say, for someone who doesn't know what to do, I would say you have to sign up for the end. So if you've never been on a missions trip, you have to sign up for the missions trip. Period.
Right.
You can't go, okay, now I've got to find the money and I've got to find the time. You actually have to find the end game, which is like, I'm going to that conference and I bought my registration. I don't have a flight. I don't have a hotel room. I don't know who's going with me, but I'm going to buy that because it makes me internally and intrinsically motivated to get to that goal. Right. So I'm going to sign up for that race, that little half marathon or that little 5K. I'm going to,
That's
go
impressive.
on that retreat.
I love that.
Does that make sense? Like do the thing that is going to force you to change. It's going to force you to do something different. And don't go, well, I need to get out of my parents' house, so I need to buy a house. Stop. You're way overestimating. Right. You don't need to buy a house to get out of your parents' house. Right. You can even go to a YWAM base for 3 months and serve during the summer to get out of your parents' house for 3 months and just try something to break up the monotony. Yes. Because what we do, I think, in your 20s is we make these huge stakes of like, I'll do it when I get married. I'll do it when I get the degree. I'll do it when the person sends me, like I get the call. Right. And it's kind of like this, like American Idol, when they give me the golden ticket, then I'll do it. You're going home. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm like, sign up for things, do things. Yeah. And even if you're not a risk taker, find a friend who is. Oh, that's so good. Because I was not a risk taker like that by nature. Right. But I had a friend named Rebecca. She was the most risk-taking fanatic ever. She was the girl that was like, we should go backpacking in Thailand and Cambodia. And I'm like, no, we should not do that.
Like,
and she's like, well, I'm going to go. Do you want to go? And I'm like, I do. Well, okay, I'll get us tickets. And so I had a friend that pushed me to take risk. So if you're risk adverse, don't expect yourself to naturally take risks.
Yes.
Just find somebody and say, I'm your wing girl. I will just say yes to anything you're doing.
Yes.
And I'll force myself to do it with you.
Yes.
And that is really important because I just naturally didn't do that. So if you are at that point, sign up for things that you have to do. Find a friend that you will, and your promise to yourself is, I will do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to go do karaoke one night, if they're going to go on a bike ride, up somewhere, if they're going to go to that conference, I'm going to do what they're going to do.
Totally.
Because if I do, it'll get me out of my stuck system of doing what I always have done.
Oh, wow.
And then I would also say, you need to get counsel and feedback from someone other than your parents.
Oh, absolutely.
Because your parents are going to reach that little girl and little boy in you no matter what, because you're in your 20s. So you need a therapist or a pastor or a leader, someone who just says, Katie, come on, you can do this. Let's do this. And you have to start breaking up with that child relationship with your parents. Not everybody. I imagine you are mature. I don't know. But for me, I had to really go through counseling to understand how to put boundaries in place, how to say yes and no, and those type of things.
Yes.
Great question. But
Good.
Forced change.
Yes. I loved how you phrased it. Do what forces you to change. Mm-hmm. Is that what you said? Is that a good quote? Like, do what forces you to change.
Sign up for
do
it.
the thing.
You have to sign up for it.
You have to
sign up for the class. Even though you're like, I don't want to do that. You have to.
Right. Oh, that's so good.
And then also serve. I mean, you're in your 20s. And I'll say this to all my 20-year-olds. Like, if your life is just about you, it's going to be really tragic.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, in the world that we live in, I think your generation is a generation of self-care, which is awesome.
Oh, like
you've learned to have a self-care day. I've never had employees until I had your generation as employees. They'd be like, I'll work 30 hours, but I won't work 40 because I need a day to myself, which I love because our generation didn't do that. We just got on medication and kept going. Like, it was not a healthy, right?
Right.
But I think for you guys, there's something about service that unlocks.
Yes.
It unlocks the human, humanity.
Yes.
That if a 20-year-old doesn't get to serve, like I didn't get to go to Guatemala and serve people or go down to LA and serve meals at a kitchen. If I didn't do those type of things, my world was very small.
Oh, totally.
And have you done stuff like that where you've been able to serve or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Through our school, I've been able to do a few missions trips, which have been so awesome. And then what I was going to ask you as well is I feel like in your 20s, you come to this space of, I know who I am. What do I do? And it's almost like we've been poured into, and you need to teach to actually get up to that next level.
It's like experience.
Totally. And so for the people who are looking, how do I pour into other people? Like, how would you say serve in youth group? Would you say, like, what would be the action step?
I was, it reminds me, I was quizzing Beckham on his history test a couple days ago. And it was talking about the different eras. And one of the eras, I'm not going to get this right, but it was like you had the noblemen, but then you had the apprentice who served the noblemen and then finally became. And there was this 4 different levels of how. Totally. So if he served, he'd serve for 7 years and he got food and clothing and he got food, clothing, and experience. But then at 7 years, then he could do a full, but he was being watched and trained. And then he finally got to become, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, we just don't have that culture where it's like, hey, Katie, you want to be in ministry? Great. So what you're going to do is you're going to be an apprentice for me for 7 years. You're going to get to live in one of my bedrooms and I'm going to feed you and, you're going to learn, but you're also at that 8-year mark. I'm going to actually watch you do what I'm doing and give you that authority to have somebody come up behind you. We just don't do that. So it's tricky in your 20s. So I would say, first of all, at 28, even I think it's biologically, your brain does clear up. So there's some shifts that are going to happen biologically. I remember. I mean, I was one of those. I think I'm not academic, but I definitely am. I think I'm very much read what my body is experiencing because of my ADD. I'm just hyper focused on certain things. But I remember at 28, all that angst of, am I missing something or I should figure this out? It just went away. It was so crazy. It was like, all right. It was like a settling. So there are certain things I want to tell 20-year-olds you cannot solve. There's something in the youthfulness that you have right now that when you get older, it's weird. Like people listen to you. You'll say the same thing in your 22 that you'll say at 32, but at 32, they will go, that's really good. And they'll listen. So there's a level of authority that you'll get as you get older that will just help you in general. Like you'll just go, I don't know why, but once I was at that age, people heard me. I was more effective. I was able to lead in a different way. So I do want to just put that on the table that there are some things that when you're young, you can't solve. It's the way the world sees you. It's the way the world works. And so that's okay. Just go, you know, as age, I'll get there. But then secondly, I think you serve, but with with autonomy. So what I saw a lot of people do is they would go, I want to be a worship leader. So I'm going to serve Havilah as a worship leader. And then she will give me that opportunity, which is great. We think that direction. But what they never did was, I'm actually going to lead worship. I will lead worship with Havilah, but if another church asks me to, or if there's a class over here, if there's something over here, I'll do that as well because it doesn't come from one source. So it's almost like in your 20s, you tend to put all your eggs in one basket versus like, okay, I actually can diversify and find.
Yes.
So I would say that's really important. And also, you have to take yourself seriously. And you can't wait for anyone to take you seriously in your 20s. So if you're clear, like you said, I've been being poured in and people have been giving me, and I have got a message, I've got the heart for this. There's a part where you have to take yourself seriously. And for me, what it looked like was at 29, starting a YouTube channel and filming it and putting it online. That's terrifying. And it was terrible. I think I had 14 views. It was not successful, but I was taking risks because I stopped waiting for a system to elevate me. And I started saying, this is who I am. And I'm going to do it anywhere I can. Yeah. So I think that's for our 20-year-olds. And I know we've talked about this before, but I remember when I was researching how to build confidence in our boys, and they said that studies have shown that you actually can't give someone confidence. You can't instill confidence. You can't say like, Katie, you're so beautiful. You're so smart. You're amazing. Actually, that is not enough to build confidence in someone. So we have an over-affirmed generation, but we have a generation that doesn't take risks. And the only way to actually build confidence in someone is they have to take a risk themselves. And studies have shown it doesn't have to succeed for it to build confidence. So you have to take a risk. You might fail miserably or you might succeed. The data shows that this outcome is the exact same. Wow. It's the part of you that chose to do it and actually tried it that confidence was built. Totally. And so that's what I want to tell my 20-year-olds is you can't read a book and listen to a podcast and sign up for a class. That's great. You can do all those things. Right. But until you do something, until you go up on a mic and pray, until you post something on socials, until you try something, you won't be confident enough to do it. Wow. Does that make sense? Oh, totally. And it's fast growing. So for me, I felt so foolish. I remember my friends, I would go to do something and think, I hate that they're probably thinking, what is Havilah doing? Yeah. And now 20 years later, I can be like, yeah, that's what I was doing. And I look like a genius, but I didn't feel like a genius. I felt like an idiot. Okay. And so in your 20s, you might feel like an idiot doing a few things, and that's okay. Does that make sense? Totally. Like you might feel like, this didn't plan out like as I wanted it to be, but that's okay. I also want to say this. I saw a lot of people in their 20s off ramp for the wrong person. Yeah. Like it was so who you marry. Now, again, I don't want to make it so high stakes. It's not like, cause everyone's flawed and people are idiots and a marriage takes two yeses and you don't 100%. Always know what you're marrying. I didn't know what I was marrying. Really, you don't know what you're marrying. And I hate to say that, but on paper, you'd be shocked I've been a pastor for almost 20, 30 years. Nothing is ever clear. You would think the best person can have the worst experience, or the most person you think, gosh, this could be crazy, ends up being the most phenomenal wife or husband. So there's no data. Does that make sense? There's no way to really know that. But I do think that in your 20s, if you date the wrong people over and over and over and over, it will affect your ability to move forward. And it will affect your confidence. It will affect how you see the world, and it will also waste your time. And so I think, and this is a Havilah,
I want to hear it.
I would rather you be single
Wow.
and happy than miserable in a relationship in your 20s. And you need to not have any shame about that. If you're not dating somebody and no one's dating you and you feel alone and you feel like that, I would rather you love yourself so much that you don't waste time or place hold with somebody who's not a great person. And that's hard to hear because we want to be included. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted.
Absolutely.
But then also I would say in my 20s, there was a couple different guys I thought this would be the one. Like this could be the one. And then they would go marry somebody else. Or I would find out, no, I don't. This is not the right one. And I would ask God, did you waste my time? Like, why did I spend so much energy and time with this person or thinking this was going to happen or they thought it was going to happen and it didn't? And he said, sometimes I put really healthy guys in placeholders. Wow. Just so that you know there's a good guy out there and just so you don't date the wrong one. And so I do think that there's a part of that too for my 20-year-olds that don't get heartbroken if it's not the one, if it doesn't end up being the one and you don't think I waste all my time. I do think God sometimes just wants you to have a placeholder and not that we're using people because I think we should date to marry. I don't think we should date to use people or date to practice on people.
Of course.
But if you end up turning around and going, what happened? I would just say, you know what? But during that 2-year moment, I was thinking there are good guys.
Yeah.
And there are guys that love the Lord and love women well.
Totally.
That's a good conclusion.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think there's a lie that the enemy's tried to plant in both men and women of the faith to be like, oh, there's no one out there. There's none left.
1,000%.
In both, because it's like I'll hear guys say, oh, there's no like Christian women out there. I'm like, I know a million.
Right.
And girls say the same about guys. So that was so good what you said, like having the belief system, like there are good men and women out there. So then
you only need one.
And you only need one.
And I feel like that's the thing. Like you only need one. So this whole idea that you need 40 to pick from, we're not on The Bachelor. Like you just need to pick.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
So you're only looking for one and that's it. So calm down. It's not a whole, So then I'm not telling you to calm down. I know you have a great boyfriend.
Calm
down,
this
is
Katie.
Not about you breaking up with him. So all you guys that are wondering if she's available, she's not right now. But go ahead.
But I guess, would you define like who is the wrong one? Because I think we hear like this list, especially as Christians, like from the stage and youth group, like you need this, you need this, you need this. And that's beautiful. But what's the wrong one? If you wouldn't mind.
Now you're really getting into the deep. Because I
think 20s are so about relationship.
It is.
It's all about friendship. And like I was saying, like there's people who have been single their whole life. There's people who got married when they were 19, 20 and now have kids. So it's like,
I know
it's this balance. Would you say?
It is. And I think that my thoughts have changed.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I'm, 47 this year. And I had a couple guys that I dated pretty seriously and was told by a friend or a parent, they're not the right one for you, or they're not. And so I would move on.
Right.
And I had to look back at that because I thought when I got married, then I married Ben, who is fantastic.
Yes.
But there was conflicts at times and it was hard. And then I would think, well, I waited for the right one. You guys told me these other guys weren't. You guys think this is the right one. I thought he was the right one too. I marry him and yet there's a battle. And so what I began to realize is that there was this part of the culture that we believe that if we pick the right one, it's like if we leave it up to God, then we're not really responsible for who we pick.
Right.
And there's this out. And what happens is then we start to have, and I can see the enemy at work because the enemy wants us to attach pain, heartbreak, and failure to God.
Ooh.
So if he can get us to think God's got the right person for us, and God's got it all set up, when that person fails, and they will, we will go, that's God. That's his character. Look what he gave me. Look at what I've had to go through. So I've come more to the point of, I think that there are a lot of people that can be the right person. And that sounds wild. I know. And because I think whoever you are married to is your person.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, totally.
So if you are married today, again, I'm not talking about an abuser. I'm not talking about a cheater. I'm not talking about people that have character flaws. I'm talking about this kind of aching thought of there's somebody out there that is probably right for me. I got a good person here, but there's somebody, and it's such a lie. Because if you're married, then they're your person. They're your type. They're that's it. Because marriage is a choice.
Totally.
But then also I would say, the first thing I would do, and I did, is I would interview their friends.
Wow. Huh. How do you do that?
Well, so for Ben, we had some mutual friends.
Mhm.
I didn't know him very well. I liked him. But I just texted him and said, hey, what do you think about Ben Cunnington?
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's bold. Because I knew his friends would tell me the truth. I knew that if this guy has a good reputation, his friends are going to back it up. I didn't ask girls that liked him. I asked people that were married, that were like good people. But I think it's, in order to know somebody, if you have to build trust quickly and you can't actually build it, you don't have 2 or 3 years and to, date somebody and figure it all out.
Yeah.
Then don't believe their mother. Don't believe, believe the friends that are in that season of life and have picked a spouse and understand what's at stake.
Wow.
But I would ask them.
Okay.
I think they'll tell you.
That's
And what I heard, this is what I remember, they said, he is such a good guy. He really likes his car clean, but he's a really good guy. And I got that over and over. And that allowed me to feel safe. Like, okay, his reputation is good.
Yeah.
And so I do think, if the guy just came into church 2 years ago and you're asking those, like, we don't know. You're looking for people that have had some distance with this person and can tell you.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so good.
But yeah, that's what I'd recommend. And then I also think it's important that you become the right person.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like, I know you're dating right now and God knows what that looks like,
Mhm.
but you will not be the person that when you get married, that's not who you're going to be. So you are the best of who you are today. You're doing as much as you can and you're doing all the things, but you will grow and he will grow and that will change. And so instead of being like worried about, well, what about this? And we need to fix this. And I don't know about that. I wish I would have understood that there will always be things that need fixed in your relationship. So don't let the anxiety of I see this and I see that stop you from moving forward.
Wow. That's so good.
Right?
Yes.
So there's red flags and there are yellow flags. And I tend to think that there are girls that are all about yellow flags. Like, it's a yellow flag. He doesn't love his mother. It's a yellow flag. He doesn't he doesn't go to church and speak in tongues 4 different ways.
Right.
Those are yellow flags. Red flags, dishonesty.
Sure.
Right? Verbal or physical abuse. Red flag.
Red
done.
flag.
Deal breaker.
Yeah.
Deal breaker, any kind of lying, any kind of stealing. I mean, just basics.
Yes.
Or a guy that doesn't want to get married. That's a red flag because he doesn't have long-term vision. He wants to just, and so, but yellow flags can be altered. So I think it's important for a woman to really go through those, but believe what he's saying, believe what he's doing, not just what he's saying. Look at the language of his body and what he's actually doing, not just what he's saying.
That's so good.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
because girls, we get caught up in what they're saying. And then as a friend, you're like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
He's not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I know we kind of like weaved all the way around, but
no, sure.
So I'm curious for you, what has surprised you in your 20s that you're like, okay, I'm 25. I'm surprised that I feel this way or that I thought I would feel a certain way. And I'm surprised that I feel this way.
Totally. And you'll probably laugh. I thought that I was going to feel like I'd arrived. Sorry. Right. So you took a sip of coffee.
Fully.
I was like, oh, like, once I'm this age, we all have invisible timelines in our brain of what life should look like. And I'm definitely not when I was 18, 25 looked very different than 25 looks now. And that's okay. And I think I'm realizing like surrendering that invisible timeline is something that you probably have to do in every decade. I'm assuming. I don't know.
I would say the 25 mark is huge.
Really? Okay. So I'm not crazy.
For me personally, it was almost like like before Christ and after Christ. It was, to me, it was like an era.
Before 25, after 25.
Yeah.
It's funny. It really does feel significant. Like, almost this, like I'm a quarter of the way through my life. It's almost like mini crisis moment. Not actually, but you know what I mean? Like
I do.
I thought I would have this done, or wow, I did this and I definitely didn't think I'd have that done by 25. That's really exciting. And so celebrating your celebrations and looking at what your opportunities for growth are. But I definitely thought I'd feel like I'd arrived.
It's so weird. I totally agree with you, Katie, because it's this weird thing of like, oh, I don't feel any different than I did at 18 internally. Like I'm the same person.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And there's this real idea of what adulthood is and what you are. And, now that I'm in my 40s and I know how everyone's like, your 30s, 40s, yes, you'll experience that. But that 25 mark is that first official. Wow. Oh my gosh, I'm getting older, but I feel like the same person.
Yes. Okay.
It's really
that's
interesting.
Totally how it feels because it's like, when I was 17, I'm like, oh, wow, 25 is so old. It's so old. And now I'm 25. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. You know what I mean? So it is this like significant, but like you said, like I still feel like I did when I was 18.
Yeah.
You know?
And there's a weight to it. Like I think people would say, oh, you're so young, you'll figure it out. But your 20s feel weighty. They do feel like, okay,
time is valuable.
Yeah.
It feels super valuable. Like time is currency of 20s.
Yes.
I feel like.
Time is. And I would say I also was surprised that I felt old at 25. Now I look back, I'm like, 25 is nothing. But you do feel like, I remember when I wasn't married by 25, I didn't have kids by 25. Right. That was a huge marker. And now I'll go to preach somewhere and say, I was 25 and not married and have kids. And this generation who has kids in their late 30s, they're like, okay, like, why is that even a big deal? But in my generation, 25 was like, that's a marker between like being married or not being married. Having kids or not having kids. It's wild.
Totally.
But now for you guys at 25, you know, I do think that there are, like I said, biological markers that will happen that you'll be shocked. And in your 20s, you're adding a lot, but you don't have a lot of, I want to say, groundedness. There's like a you feel a little anxiety or angst about unsettled. what's happening, where are we going, what am I doing, I want to do that, how am I going to pay for that, I need to go here. In your 30s, you will have this kind of, okay, I don't have that angst, I do have that drive and that concern I need, but it's different. It's like a youthful angst that I want to tell you that in about 3 to 4 years, and I wish. When I hit 28, I thought, gosh, I wish I would have told Havilah at 21 that angst is just part of being young. It's not because you're missing something.
Oh, wow. That's so good. Because that's such a real feeling to be like,
very real.
Am I doing something wrong? Should I be doing something else? Am I in the right place? It's so good.
It is.
Can you say it again?
Well, just, I wish I would have told when I turned 28, I remember thinking, I wish I would have told the 21-year-old Havilah that you're not doing anything wrong, that angst, that kind of unrest is just natural. It's youthfulness. It's the angst of youthfulness.
Yeah.
And you will, and again, if you're married and have kids, you might not have had time to think about it. I think there's certain women that were just in the throes of life, and so they weren't thinking about it. But for the rest of us that weren't, and we were just on-ramping onto adulthood, there's this weird little, what am I doing?
Yes.
And very much
so. Then what is the one question you wish you would have asked while you were in your 20s?
I think I would have, to ask myself, I think I definitely would have told myself a few things.
Okay.
I would have said, Havilah, it's all about timing. And some things it's just not time.
Wow.
And I didn't understand the power of time and timing.
Wow.
That I would get married and have kids and do the things, but it was going to take longer than I wanted. And I was going to have a few crises internally, but that it was just about timing.
Wow.
That I was saying the same messages, praying the same prayers in my early 20s. And in my late 20s and early 30s, I was being taken seriously, and yet nothing changed in my heart.
Wow.
And in my mind. So it was that kind of idea that like, it's about timing.
Wow.
And I would have told myself that you will outlast your critics.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I remember one of my family friends said, you're not going to go to college. I said, no, I'm serving my church. And they said, well, I've got a friend who works for this big, evangelist. I could get you a call with them and get you maybe to work for him. And I'm thinking, and inside I'm thinking, okay, he's even thinking about on-ramping me to somewhere else. And I know I'm supposed to be doing this. So I would just, I would have said, I think I also would have told myself that I would outlast my critics, but also that the foundation I was building was going to be worth it.
Oh, it's so good.
And that people are going to see what I was sowing in later on. They're going to see fruit, and they will understand the years of digging and the years of letting those roots go down. And so I think that's really important for a 20-year-old to understand that if you are just in your right mind, you love God, you're trying to do the right thing, you're signing up, and you're not winning wars and you're not standing on top of high mountains, that is still very, very valuable and more valuable than all those other things. Like I saw a lot of people win these massive things in their early 20s and never made it. But if you can spend your energy building depth, then when you hit your 30s and 40s and 50s, people will go, how did you build your life like this? And you'll think, because I built it when everyone was wondering what I was doing with my life, why I was going there, why I was moving there. And they were criticizing me and why I wouldn't date that guy and why I didn't marry that guy. And just, they were confused about my choices.
Right.
And yet I wanted to say, yeah, I was making choices about my future self.
Oh.
And so as a 20-year-old, you need to make decisions that your future self will be proud of.
Making choices for your future self.
That you'll be proud of.
Yes.
And I knew I would be proud. I'd rather be single and be proud of myself than date the wrong guy.
Right.
Things that does that make sense?
Oh,
Things like that. But yeah, I think too, the world is never going to see your potential. They just won't see what's in you. They'll see, they might see you as like yeah, you can do this well, or she's really good at this. Like Katie's beautiful. She's talented in music. But see, we don't know if there's a writing gift. We don't know if there's a counseling gift. We don't know what's in you. And so most often they will miss what you're best at.
Wow.
And so,
that's crazy.
Yeah. And so to not get caught up in what the world is identifying as your great strengths, but to actually go, but I'm going to emerge. There's a hidden Katie in there that will emerge.
Wow.
And it will be something she's very proud of, but it may not be obvious.
I don't know that I've ever heard that said before in that way. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, the talents, I mean, I led worship early in my 20s and did that all through. Don't do that anymore. But I had books and made it know.
Right.
But then also I think if I could let go of the criticism in my 20s.
Like towards yourself.
Things people said.
Yeah.
Things people said. And then things that, I think things that were said to me and toward me, just things that were not even meaning to hurt me, but things I picked up along the way. I think in my 20s, I think it's really important to find what's in your backpack and unlock some of those things. Because if you don't, 30s get heavier and 40s get impossible.
Whoa. Yeah. No, that's so good.
So then in your 40s, you're carrying around something that happened in your 20s from a friendship, from a relationship, from a financial decision. And then you're going, why is life so hard? And it was back there. So I would say take time to unpack.
Okay.
Take time to unpack. And then also do not... And then also assess, and this is something I wish I would have done too, is what generational legacy do I want to continue and what generational curses do I want to interrupt?
Oh my gosh, that's powerful. That's powerful.
Because this is when you get to start your legacy. This is your journey. So, I want to, like, one of the things that I wanted to break off was I didn't want ADHD to be undiagnosed in my family at age anymore.
Wow.
I wanted to actually have it diagnosed and treated. That was something that was important to me.
Yeah.
I also wanted therapy to be something we used in our family. And I never had that growing up. And I just wanted that to be something I used. Right. Does that make sense? Like,
totally.
So there are certain things that I was like, but things that I loved, I wanted family to be important. I wanted it to be a safe home. I wanted to make sure that we valued relationships. So there are things that I carried on, but I had to evaluate what I wasn't going to go on with. And so in your 20s, I would do that as well. And do that with your spouse as well. But yeah. Katie, this has been such a good conversation. Is there anything else that you want to ask or say before we close?
Oh my gosh, I think you covered it all so well. I have a lot to think about.
Well, you're amazing. And to be honest, I feel like I'm trying to tell somebody who's already winning at so many things about how to win more, but I hope that helps. And if you are watching today and you're in your 20s or your daughter's in your 20s or your friends are, and you're like, oh, they need to have a conversation about their 20s, make sure you share this episode with them. I think it'll really help. And again, I just know that when we get to be normal and we know that it's normal, all the anxiety goes away and we start to give ourselves empathy and we begin to live a better life. So maybe you are in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s and you watch this today and maybe you found more compassion for your 20-year-old self. I mean, that's probably the goal. You might be looking at Katie and a little jealous that she gets to do it all over, but all the things that are important. I hope you enjoyed this episode. This is the beginning of a long series, and our series are conversations with 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And so make sure you tune in this month. And then next month, the beginning of the year, we're actually doing a brand new series. I'm so excited about it, but it's all about living with intention. It's about how do we actually build an intentional life. And I'm going to give you all my tips, tricks, and all the things that have worked for me and hopefully empower you to live 2025 as your best year yet. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. But other than that, Katie, thanks for being here. And thank you for being here. And we'll see you next time.